familial, we can think about what we did. We tell the story as it is our own. We all know it. We all take ownership of it. In fact, we do it every year. We sit around the Seder table. Don't you remember when we were slaves in Egypt? It's ours.
So his sons are not violent.
So from a critical analysis, we cannot say, we can't say either way, to be very honest.
Right.
There's no birth certificate.
Say again?
There's no birth certificate.
Yeah, so we don't have to worry about that idiot from Arizona. But, Dad, Rabbi.
I thought it was a good show.
Yeah, I know. But the point is that, please help yourself with cooking. The point is that most scholarship hold their 12 distinctly tribes. And the reasoning for that is the sidebar, I'm going to tell you right now. When you get to the book of Joshua, and particularly when you get to 1st and 2nd Kings, what do you think is, so where is Jerusalem? Jerusalem is in Judah, that tribal area. But Jerusalem is also the tribe of Benjamin. And there's a story about the tribe of Benjamin pretty much getting obliterated. Mainly because they were no longer partners with the other Confederate tribes. And so the tribes basically took matters in their hands. Benjamin becomes a non-entity. While Benjamin is not considered one of the 10 lost tribes, Judah and Benjamin are considered the ones that survived. Nevertheless, it really is a lost tribe. They're gone. When we talk the tribal units, there's a great deal of debate that when you look at the tribal land allocations in any ancient Israeli map, Dan is in the north, Manasseh is divided in half. Half is in the lower Jordan Valley, half is in the land of Israel. Asher is in the Jordan Valley, and one more.
Gad?
The Gad, I'm not sure. You may be right, I couldn't remember. I know Dan is north, had the phrase tell Dan, that's where the archaeological site, which both of you have been at. But all the other places, you know, the story is that 10 of them kind of left and kept going east, and Babylon just kept going. We don't really know. So that's why the theory about the Confederacy, that perhaps that land and portion, while it's later, really was earlier. In other words, they make the story to make it fit later. Okay. So, we have a national formation, the transition from Jacob family in Genesis to a group of tribes, sons of Jacob, Bnei Israel, and so Exodus and beyond. The tribe ceased to exist as a political body after the Assyrian conquest in the northern kingdom in 722. Northern kingdom fell first, southern kingdom holds on until 586. We know this. It is thus likely that these stories were first told and collected before them while the Joseph group still existed in the northern part of the country. Yet, as we shall see, parts of the story feature Judah as a protagonist and view him positively. Hence, perhaps one of the reasons, one of the myriad of reasons, why we are Judaism versus Benjaism or Naphtaliism or whatever else. Okay?
Interesting.
This is not surprising since most of the Hebrew Bible has come to us via Judean or Jerusalemite lenses. It is likely that an earlier story, Reuben, as the other important brother, because he's the firstborn, was taken over by scribes and editors of the southern kingdom shortly after his northern Joseph kingdom's demise. Now, to call the northern kingdom Joseph is a little misleading because Joseph is not one of the 12 tribes. It's his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Don't forget, Levi has no tribal location other than the sacrificial cult. So that's how you have 12 minus 1, that's Levi. And that 1 with Joseph makes the other 2, that's Ephraim and Manasseh. And that's the story. Now, the story, the narrative tells us he had two sons in Egypt. And Jacob does to them what Isaac did to Jacob, what Abraham did to Isaac and Ishmael. Meaning, the blessing gets switched up. We say, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh, but Manasseh is the firstborn. Because the story is what? Jacob went like this when he blessed the grandsons. Okay? Anyway, part 2. Some source critical insights. Remember, source criticism means, is it an E source, Elohim? Is it a J source, Yud He Vav He, Jehovah? Is it, well, in this case, it's going to be E or J. It's not, we don't have to worry about P so much, or D, Deuteronomic yet. 2 brothers saved Joseph's life. Reuben stops his brothers from murdering him, saying it's not a good idea, and they throw him in a pit, And then Judah says, sell him. The brothers agree to both ideas. Yet when Reuben returns to the pit, he left. The story tells us he left. We have no idea. The Midrash is hilarious. He was horny. He went to a concubine to relieve his needs, and then comes back. I mean, that's what the Midrash tells us. I have to laugh when I read that. I'm like, well, isn't that fascinating? Okay? Now, I think the Midrash is also playing off of, we're going to see this in biblical law, or you may have read it in here, where they take the concept of the Israelites being at the bottom of the mountain. So the Midrash implies the bottom means the mountain is held over their head. And God says, you will accept these laws. And we say, we have heard and we will obey. Or the implication is God will drop the mountain on us and we shall die. So the implication here is that Judah is going to go through all this mishigas with his sons and his daughter-in-law, that maybe Reuben also is trying to take care of family matters. We don't know. All right. So why didn't Reuben know they were selling him? And in fact, when the brothers tell their father that Joseph is dead, Reuben has to believe it. In other words, the other brothers knew he was sold, but Reuben didn't know that yet. All he knows is the bloody coat. So we have to ask ourselves, why is the narrative set up that way? So to add this problem, the sale of Joseph is particularly confusing. He's picked up by Midianites, but sold to the Ishmaelites. Two different strands that are in that story. He is then sold to Egypt by the Medanites, but also by Ishmaelites. The contradictions are noted and explained by most of the medieval Parshanim, meaning medieval commentators. Rashi, for example, suggests that Joseph was sold twice. The brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites, who then resold him to the Midianites. And I did keep the notes, and I do apologize, I didn't have time to translate some of the notes for you, which are there. And when we get to those notes, I will be more than happy to share that. But, so the first note is from Rashi, when it says, the Hebrew Anashim Adeim, and they were transferred him to the Medinite or Midianite men. And I will be honest, even Rashi knows that that's a challenge, because the Hebrew can be both Midianite and Medinites. Yes, there are two distinctly different tribes. The irony of all this, of course, is what? Midianites are our friends, because Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, is a Midianite priest. But what happens by the time we get to Deuteronomy, they become our enemy, and we need to obliterate them on the way into the land. So obviously there's some family dysfunction that happened, right? Now, Zehi Shira Acharot, this is that he was sold afterwards. So in other words, implying that he sold twice. And so that it is written there that it happened twice. Okay? And so, and he goes on furthermore, but I just want to tell you what's there. Alright. Rashi's grandson, the Rashbam, excuse me. There's the
There's
that's the best typo.
Ramban.
Ramban, and Rashbam. I gotta get all the runs. The Rashbam is Rashi's grandson. Nachmanides is the Ramban. Maimonides is the Rambam.
Yeah, Rashi had no sons, right? He only had
All four
daughters.
daughters.
Okay, so
Who's on
I read a
first?
bunch of books.
Who's on first?
Who's on first? I don't know. Third base. Someone just sent me a copy of that in
Yes.
Hebrew.
yeah.
Oh, that might be.
It doesn't really work as well, but it's very fascinating. I'm sorry. What we Scott?
What's the importance of if he was sold once, he sold twice?
So the point is not that. That point is a rabbinic issue, right? The modern scholar issue, to whom is he being sold to, and why do we have this mislineage or mislinear statement in the narrative? In other words, we get Ishmael in one sentence, but we get Midianite in the next sentence. We, the reader now, and the modern critical reader now, want to understand, why are we talking about two different people here all of a sudden? What really happened, and why is that there? Where responding is, and as with biblical narrative, we have to acknowledge it's not one strand.
I get that, but why is it important? Why
Why important it is there now? My suspicion is threefold. Number one is the Ishmaelites are part of our family. They're our half-siblings, don't forget. That's Isaac's brother Ishmael and their descendants, which will later become the progenitors of Islam.
Oh, okay.
Okay? The Midianites will also be family for a short period of time because the greatest prophet of all time, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher, is going to marry into the Midianite family. His father-in-law is a high Midianite priest, Jethro. Yitro. In fact, a Midianite priest is going to have a Torah portion named after him.
But we never hear anything about the children from this, so there's really no line there.
We do, don't forget, Zipporah and Moshe have two sons, Gershon and, not Gershonides, that's later.
Yeah, but we never hear much about
Beyond that, no, we do not hear anything about them. You are
so
correct.
that's kind of the end of
So,
it.
but because, why, in my opinion, what's that third strand? The P writer, the priestly writer. The priestly line is not Moses. The priestly line is Aaron and his sons, and his two surviving sons, Eleazar and Eleazar, maybe. I don't remember.
Itamar.
I'm sorry?
Itamar?
Itamar, maybe, yeah, thank you. But we already know Nadav and Abihu, gone. So you're asking a great question. I can only give you conjecture.
That gave me a good answer because it traces Islamic.
Well, that's one side. Midianite, the other side. The Mennonites, I have no idea who all these people are. I haven't spoken to them in years. Okay? You know, the joke is...
So you understand why I'm confused.
Right, no. So, from a critical scholarship and historical piece, you need to understand something else. When Jacob and his sons go into Egypt, there's actually a word for that. Exodus, to go in. Versus the Exodus, to leave. And the timeline from the Exodus to the Exodus is 432 years, 422 years, that number right there, okay? Over 400 years. So that would be approximately, on the liberal end, 10 generations, each generation being 40 years, right? From a 10 generation to go from 70 to 600,000. And that 600,000 only counts the men from ages 20 to 50. So you're not counting anyone over 50 or below 20, women, and anything else.
Well, they got busy.
No question they got busy. They got so busy that there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, knew not the goodness that this person did for the people, which, by the way, is a little problematic. Right? I'm going to save you. We're going to stock up for 7 years. 7 years of plenty ends. Now the famine has happened. Come back to the silos. You can help yourself wherever you want because you stocked up. Oh, we're running out. But tell you what, you're going to give me your land. Tell you what, now you're going to become an indentured servant to the Pharaoh. So all of the stuff that's going to happen to the Israelites is what happened to the Egyptians first. What did the narrative do? First there arose a Pharaoh who knew not, so does not know any of this history, and therefore these people are numerate, they got busy. Therefore let's stop it. Except he's an idiot. He throws the baby boys in the Nile. You only need one man. You need many women. If he did it the other way around, that would have killed the people. But he didn't. And he begged all those questions. And then, of course, the little baby that's saved, and all that process. We're going to look at biblical law in a little bit. But my point is...
actually, there's a lot of parallels to today's modern issues with climate change and population starting to move in the Middle East.
So we'll get back, when we get to biblical law is really simple. We make it more complex than it really is. Only two things. I made this world, take care of it. That's Genesis. That's creation. And Exodus is, you know who the boss is, and I'm the one who got you out of Egyptian slavery. So as long as you follow my rules, I'll take care of you. And that is the simple basis of Jewish law. It's not that complex. What the complexity of it, of course, is how the rabbis interpret it and how we're to follow it. That's a whole other issue, which we'll get to soon enough. But again, biblical narrative is simply what we're trying to do now. And where did it come from? Because it's not an old guy sitting around the campfire and said, let me tell you this story. It's a little much more complicated than that. That's all we're trying to point out. Okay? Good.
The way you described it, it sounds like George Carlin.
A little bit. Yes.
You know, consolidating the Ten Commandments.
Well, George Collins says we only need one.
Well,
What is it now? Yeah, keep thy nookie thyself. That was one of the other ones. But I love that routine.
Yeah.
I love that routine. When he played the priest in the movie Dogma,
Oh, it was great.
I really thought the Catholic Church was going to crap on itself. So
plots.
that's one of my favorite movies of all time. All time. That's not one we use for the Ten Commandment hopping, so you know. Anyway, Rashi sold twice. Rashi's grandson, Rashbam, suggests that the brother never actually sold Joseph. But that while they were deliberating, a group of Midianites came, pulled Joseph out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites. In other words, we're rescuing you, we don't need you, we're going to sell you. again, the text allows any of those possibilities. All we're saying is they saw a caravan and he was sold. The context is implied as them doing it. Okay? More likely, the final form of Genesis has combined two versions of a similar story. A Judah and Ishmaelite version and a Reuben and Midianite version, which is most likely what really happened. In the Judah story, the brothers are about to kill Joseph when Judah suggests selling him the Ishmaelites, which they do. In the Reuben version, the brothers are about to kill Joseph when Reuben suggests throwing him in a pit. Later, Reuben sneaks back to the pit to save Joseph, meaning he got done with his business, but then a group of Midianites had already found him and taken him away. Now, one of my favorite sermons of all time, we were in Charlotte, North Carolina Greensboro, North Carolina, take it back, for a Central Conference of American Rabbis Convention. This was the convention where we voted to permit officiation of same-sex weddings. Rabbi Shir Stern was a leader of that coalition. But many of us came in early on Saturday so we can attend local evangelical churches on Sunday. And that Sunday, the minister gave the speech about Joseph. The 3 P's. From the pit, to the prison, to the palace. I mean, I still remember the sermon. It's that powerful. And I have no idea what the message was. I gotta be honest with you. I just remember the certain key points. I mean, ultimately, I know what the message was. Is that no matter where you are in your life, if Joseph can pull himself out, you can pull himself out. And why? Because you have faith in God. All right, fine. I mean, it's very simplistic, but I remember. Very visual. Okay? Well, that's the story. So we have the Reuben line, and we have the Judah line. Reuben is north, Judah is south. The south is going to win. This is the one time the south actually gets to win. Because they're the ones who survive longer. That's the only reason.
And the northern kingdom is also called Israel, right? Like
Northern
Israel
kingdom is Israel, southern kingdom is Judah. That is correct.
Okay, but so Reuben is
Is in Israel.
relates to the northern kingdom.
Correct. And again, calling it Israel is a slightly misleading because we're thinking the state, the people, and so forth. It's just simply Israel because the majority of Bnei Israel are north, versus the southern is the smaller number of tribes. Also, northern Israel was much more inhabitable than southern Israel. Outside of Jerusalem, even in the mountainous range, you don't have a whole lot. Don't forget, they didn't have the desert blooming concept yet. Okay? All right. Reuben is Jacob's firstborn. Well, we already know he's going to get a bad name because at the end of the last portion of Genesis, on Jacob's deathbed, he, quote, blesses his sons. And he says to Reuben, you SOB, you slept with one of my concubines, which is exactly what he did. Because that's what he was busy doing when he left the pit.
Do we read about that?
Yes, we do. We do read. Not at that moment. That's Midrashic making the connection, but absolutely read in the text that he left. I'll tell you, I'll give you the right text, so I don't have to guess at it.
It's only my 3rd time through the whole book.
No worries. It gets after a while, it gets all discombobulated. Right here, come on. Torah, Genesis. I'm looking the wrong one. Go from here. Do that. Sleeps. His father's.
Honey.
Bela, yeah. His father's concubine. And the text is.
Wait, 35:22?
Give me the 35, Genesis 35:22. When Israel stayed in the land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard, and then the text goes on. So yes. Okay. So Reuben, firstborn, who lost his primogeniture. All that means is he lost the blessing of the firstborn. Well, great. Which came first? His extreme love for his beloved son Joseph because it came from the wife he loved the most, Rachel, or Reuben sleeping with his wife? In other words, is the narration being written to explain why Joseph is going to get the blessing and not the firstborn? But to be honest, the firstborn in the book of Genesis always gets it all right, but never the blessing. Not in the book of Genesis. Abraham's not the firstborn, he's Terah's thirdborn. Isaac's not the firstborn, Ishmael is. Jacob's not the firstborn, Esau is. And of course, Joseph is not the firstborn, Reuben is. Once we leave Genesis, Moses is not even the firstborn, Aaron is. And there's a debate between Aaron and Miriam, who's really the firstborn. Because in the story, it makes Miriam like a little girl, but later on, they make them like equal age. Well, that can't be. Okay? And so, I want to be very clear, until Aaron's sons take over the priesthood, the younger two, by the way, who get zapped, is when the firstborn really does get the primogeniture. Prior to that, it's never the case. Okay? And this reflects the tribe of Reuben's loss of prominence and eventual disappearance during the time when the northern kingdom was still in existence. Well, the northern kingdom falls. Why? Because your ancestors loved his grandmother. With his mother, I mean, right? And it wasn't his mother, by the way. Feel how his mother's Leah. That's not a question. All right? He's left with his father's concubine, which means one of his father's wives.
Does she have a name?
Bilhah.
Bilhah.
Okay,
That's
I'm
right
sorry.
there.
That's right. No,
I see
no worries.
it. Come on.
All right. Judah, Leah's fourth son, comes into dominance later on and plays a decisive role in the family reunification in Egypt. The two versions here reflect the struggle between the two groups, with the redacted text reflecting Judah as winner. So, redaction means the following. We can ascertain that there are two or more strands of narration coming down, and when we talk about the strands, we talk about the E, Elohim, the J, Jehovah, Yahweh, the other two, priestly and Deuteronomic, and there is a fifth one, the R, the redactor, the writers who sat down and decided this was going to be the text. But is a little inappropriate to say writers? No. But whoever was leading and having this oral tradition being transmitted, they decided this was going to be the story.
So it's the edited version.
It is the edited version, but see, to call them editors implies that the written document. Not yet, but obviously it's coming, because the redactors also do exist. So when we talk about these different strands, they all exist about 6 centuries before the Common Era. So that is when the Torah, the 5 books, are put together. I remind you again, at one time we believed there are no such thing as the 5 books. There is no Chumash. There was 4. Right? Because by the end of the Numbers, when you look at it, we're ready to go in. Deuteronomy says, wait a minute. Before you go, let's go over the rules one more time. Deuteronomy is considered during the book of Kings, when Josiah is king and they find the book. That's Deuteronomy. Which is why the language of Deuteronomy is so different from the language of Genesis and Exodus, which is the standard E strand and J strand. Okay. Nevertheless, Reuben group is dominant, long lost, it still persists. So all we've done here is, we're going backwards. But we have Judah and Reuben as our two protagonists. Joseph is the puppet in all this. Now, Joseph's punishment. He's always punished in twos. He's thrown in the pit and then into prison. He is stripped naked twice. Once his brothers take his cantonet, this is the colored coat. And I know it says uncertain, but whatever it is. And then he leaves his clothing to Madame Potiphar. When Potiphar tries to grab him, because she wants to rape him, he flees and she grabs his coat. To show, see, the man was here. Where else do we see that image? The Tamar story.
Oh, yeah.
After Judah lays with Tamar,
The ring.
he has to pay her because he thinks she's a prostitute. In particular, a cultic prostitute, by the way. A cultic prostitute is a woman who hangs out near a sacrificial altar. And instead of making an offering, she serves God by letting people sleep with her. I'm not advocating we bring this back.
Is that a
but,
Jewish thing?
Well, no. Well, not well. In the story it is.
Please explain.
Well, we haven't really set up the temple yet.
Right, so we have to be careful about that, and we're going to reject it. Well, that's what makes Leviticus chapter 18 so fascinating. Leviticus 18 deals with all the people you can't marry. Mother, father, brother, sister, son, daughter, grandmother, grandfather, grandson, granddaughter, aunt, uncle, niece, nephew.
How about
The
your
way
cousin?
cousins allowed, perfectly allowed. First cousins, and New Jersey is also legal, by the way. If you read Leviticus 18 and then go get a copy of New Jersey marriage laws, you start snickering. It's word for word. The only difference is now there's a / and the opposite gender because we allow same sex. Okay, but it's in. I mean, you read it verbatim. It's hilarious. Now, but what happens after all that, right? First it says you should not spill your seed to the fire god Molech. So clearly, there is a cultic practice that one masturbated on the altar as part of the worship experience. Again, what was going through someone's mind that, you know what? I want to serve God by masturbation.
Would it be fertility?
It could be, and no different from what we
That the
know from
crop should
Polynesian
grow.
culture of taking young virgins and feeding the volcano, but from a practical perspective with population control, when you're on an island, you can't grow too much. Your resources are going to be limited. But yes, that if I masturbate, but we are clear in our text, you can't do that. So that's not our tradition.
Back to the same-sex marriage. Can you marry your sister, your mother, your...
So what it
same sex
says,
is
very
the
fascinating,
same?
what it says there, I know what you're asking. You cannot marry your father's wife.
My father's wife.
So in other words, you can't marry your mother, and you cannot marry your father's wife. Because don't forget, in the Torah, the father can have more than one spouse.
So you can't marry your stepmother.
You can't marry your stepmother. Now, in legal law, you can. You can marry your stepmother. Obviously, she has to be divorced from your father.
Well,
Okay?
she's not a blood relative.
Well, there's
Not a what? Likewise,
She's just
you
fast.
cannot marry your brother's sister.
Brother's sister.
Right then, you're about right.
That's
You cannot marry your brother's wife, what I meant to say. You cannot marry your brother's wife. Unless you're obligated through levirate. Which meant your brother died and didn't have any heirs, and then therefore you are required to marry your
Are
sister-in-law.
we talking Torah or New Jersey law?
Torah, Jersey law, you can marry your brother's spouse.
Oh, I hope
if
not.
he is divorced, not at the same time.
So the same sex, the same rules would
Same
apply?
rules, same rules.
You have no brother.
I
So,
don't,
yeah, I mean, legally, we cannot stop anybody from marrying a step-family member. There's no violation. And believe it or not, there's no moral issue with it. So, I mean, creepy, yes, but no moral issue, right?
This is just a little aside that it's in my mind. When I was teaching in elementary school, we had portable classrooms. And one weekend, a portable of one of the female teachers was broken into and somebody masturbated on her playing book.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that.
And the significance of that is?
I knew that was
And oh
coming.
wow, it took a whole half hour for that. Okay,
I knew that
But
was.
talking about,
Are you glad you got that off your chest?
so that's the first one, but wait a minute.
Excuse me,
But don't
finish.
forget what happens next. In the text, what happens next? A man may not lie with a man if one lies with a woman is an abomination. So again, we know for a fact that it was a cultic practice to have two men have gay sex, which basically meant anal sex, on the altar. And likewise, the third one is, one shall not lie with a beast as one lie with a woman. Because there was a cultic practice to bring sheep or other animals, have sexual intercourse with that animal as a way of offering. Which, fertility actually makes sense in a very creepy, weird way. Right?
Those farmers are very lovely.
Yes. That's the old joke. We're in Texas, men are men and sheep are scared. Anyway. Well, the other one I like, how was your date Saturday night? Not bad. Okay? Anyway, they're both bad. Anyway, the point is that we have to acknowledge that none of this happens in a vacuum. They're clearly writing based on their experience and what they're either accepting or rejecting in the culture around them. That does not change how this is our story, but we're looking at it critically and not taking it as simple, surface, face value.
But
So-
in the Orthodox tradition,
This stuff makes them crazy.
I would think so.
Yes. In fact, my favorite story, Rabbi Danny Syme, Emeritus Rabbi of Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. He was doing the lecture on family issues in Genesis at the Cage Conference, but not the Cage.
Mm-hmm.
This was the Philadelphia Auerbach Agency, same concept of Jewish educators. And I went when I was in Delaware, and the Orthodox walked out in the middle of the lecture because he was talking about the dysfunctional Jewish families of Genesis.
Oy.
We're like, duh.
So when they read this portion,
They read as all God's divine plan to get us to Egypt so we can become God's children. There is no ifs or buts.
And there's nothing in between.
No. Well, the in-between is the Midrashic or the Rashi and so forth. What is fascinating, to be fair and honest, the narration is not as crucial as the lesson to lead a Jewish life is. So the importance toward the Mishnah and Talmud is a higher value than the Midrash or the narration that's going on in the first place. And when we talk about Orthodox, we're talking about really ultra-Orthodox. Modern Orthodox will tear away this just like we will. No problem. And again, the Midrash is obviously tearing away at it. We have to not take Midrash as just Orthodoxy. The Midrash, they know something's up. And they're questioning, they're challenging, and we have enough evidence to say that they know that there are different strands, and now they're trying to understand the strand they have in front of them, what does it mean?
But in these stories, things are always up, it seems.
Okay, yeah. Alright, so, literary explanation number 1, multiplying difficulties. These repetitions highlight the grave dangers that befall Joseph. The more difficulties the future hero faces from his birth or even earlier, the more impressive his eventual achievements. The more obstacles he clears, the more confident he will be to lead. What is the traditional interpretation? He's an immature brat, and he has to mature. And he matures when he's in prison. So that even when he still wants to challenge his brothers who don't recognize him, his heart becomes full, and he realizes, no, they're good people, and now I understand the dreams that I used to have about the corn, and about the, not the corn, that's Pharaoh, about the stars, and about all that other stuff, that different part of God's plan.
The sheaves of wheat.
The wheat, thank you. Okay? The more he withstands sexual temptation by married women, such as Potiphar, the more trustworthy and ethical, the less impeachable he must seem. From Sargon to Oedipus and beyond, the hero's trajectory to power and authority is not complete without overcoming complications that would have reduced a lesser man. But this answer still feels insufficient. It makes sense that the text would multiply ordeals, but why 2 ordeals of the same nature? So we're trying to understand why the double. And the double will continue, as I said earlier. If Dad's still alive, and then he asks a second time, is Dad really still alive? Why does that happen? Number 2, Joseph needs 2 rounds of ordeal. The Bereshit Bara, that's a Midrash, and other point out, Joseph starts out as an arrogant, as I just shared with you, foolish youngster, and throughout his stay at Potiphar's house, it's not all clear that he is completely blameless. Why? Because he's walking around shirtless. The Midrash says he's strutting around like he is a peacock. Okay? And free of conceit. He is still in need of education. In the language of the sages, he needs to undergo another test. He needs to show that he's either naturally righteous, never feeling temptation, or that he can control his desire with the Egyptian woman along the lines of who's the hero? Who or he who controls his desire. That is from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Ancestors. Thus, another round is necessary for the schooling process of the young man. He will be on trial until he learns humility, which he finally shows with the interpretation of Egyptian courtier's dreams, which are also doubled, right? He has 2 sets of dreams. Pharaoh has 2 sets of dreams. Everything's a doublet. Just want to look at the notes 1 second, I'm sorry.
Is it instructional when you double things? It's emphasis, so like a lot of this is oral, and by repeating it, it makes a stronger emphasis.
So the answer is, from a practical perspective, you're absolutely right. The mnemonic method of duplication helped the memory work to tell the story. But if we're going to look at a critical text, is it really that simple? Is it simply just mnemonic? Or is there another strand that we should be looking for? And that's what they're trying to talk about. Did I get into 7 yet? Yes. One in growth and desire. Ezehu Gibor, Hakovash et Yezeru. That's the statement. That's a nice ringtone. Anyway, the meaning of the dreams in ancient Near East. Joseph tells 2 dreams that are one. Both are symbolic visions of the future rule over his family. His dreams do not require interpretation, as evident by the brothers' resentment. In other words, it's obvious to them. The courtier's dreams are also paired, although they require interpretation. The courtier's meaning here, the butler and the baker. So I'm using the show as the reference, okay? A different one for each they prove correct in due course. Of course, the butler will be killed and the butler will survive, the baker will be killed. Okay? Since Freud, Jung, and their successors, it is customary to interpret dreams as expressions of inner states of consciousness, processing past and present experiences, wishes, fears, and desires. Dreams in the ancient world are conceptualized otherwise. They are understood as predictions of the future, coming from God or gods as the divine portent. So what has changed? If you want to know what your dreams are about, we would ask about what are the stresses in your life, what did you eat before going to bed. In other words, we're asking all of the triggers that would make understanding what your dreams. Versus, are your dreams now to tell you what's happening in the future? Biblically, narrative, dreams are strictly foretelling. For a narration, why do we care about dreams? They want to tell us the narration of the future. In Shalom Aleicham's Fiddler on the Roof, what's the purpose of the dream? The purpose of the dream is to justify behavior of a decision. And so using the narrative of what I call the historical experience, saying this was God's plan, I'm now taking the dream sequence to justify my actions, which is not the text and not psychologically appropriate for today. It's the combination of the two. Okay? Alright, the doubling of the dreams. But why are the dreams in pairs when the first pair always has wheat in it, by the way, and the second bolsters the meaning of the first? It's wheat and stars. It's wheat meaning the bread and the bird's taking it away. It's the wine goblet, so we don't get so much wheat in the butler one. Pharaoh is fat cows and corn, another form of wheat. Okay? By the way, we know it's not corn. Everybody knew that, right? Maize is not indigenous to the Middle East. So it's not corn, it's just an interpretation. Okay, I made sure you knew that.
But I assume it's some of the type of grain they ground up and made bread with.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Okay. And bread, the sustenance of life. Okay?
It's organic.
The wheat element functioned as an early hint for Joseph's later career, where he provides wheat for the Egyptians. Because he's basically going to be the bread distributor. He is the first leader of the Bible, if you will, with the Great New Deal of the biblical era. So he is the World Wheat Organization. I got the other W to make it the WWW, but it didn't work. These repetitions do not derive from different sources, but are for emphasis, that goes the mnemonic method, in order to foreground the singular, emphatic meaning of the double dream. That the middle pair, the concierge dreams, is a variation. They, with contrasting meanings, strengthen the argument, the other serve as a literary function. In other words, one is the mnemonic method of literary remembrance, and the other is to validate the narration of the story, that he can interpret dreams. He's been given that divine power. The first round, the implication is anyone can interpret. And the latter round, Pharaoh is too, and this is also a setup, Pharaoh is too incompetent, and his courtiers and his court are incompetent to interpret the dream. You need someone who knows what they're doing, and that's when the butler remembers Joseph in the prison. Whereas the two in the prison are so complicated, that is just to show us, wow, he has been given God's gift to do this. Okay? And so the weakness of Pharaoh's leadership, because we're going to see how it's going to get weaker. All right. Now, Judah is more than just about an individual. So Rashi asks, why is this here? Because it's like really out of sequence. So he writes that the placement of the story here reflects the brothers' displeasure at their father's mourning, and consequently less respect for Judah, because he advised selling Joseph instead of bringing him back to his father. So, today is a weird day for my household. Today is the 4th anniversary of my brother's death, and it's the end of Shloshim for Samantha's father. So today was a little weird day. And, we woke up this morning and we kind of knew, but we didn't say it. And then we went, oh yeah, that's today. The narration implies that Jacob never recovered from Joseph's death. In other words, from a Jewish law perspective, he never stopped. Where Jewish law says you do your 30 days, you slowly work your way up to the year, and then you live. And it's been more than a year.
Maybe because there's no body. They say
That
in the
could be.
body and a funeral they have a closure.
Again, no, they're
There's
great.
always the chance he was still alive somewhere.
Well, obviously, right, and again, and I love that analysis, I really do, because there's no implication in the text that Jacob is thinking this, but we, midrashically, thinking, why is this going on? You're absolutely right. The one thing the play does really nicely is when they come back after the whole pit selling enslavement scene, that's the country western genre. When they start off with what I call the old moody country western model, where basically my wife left me for our horse and my life is over, genre of music. And so it's all that, whatever. And all of the concubines are surrounding Jacob, comforting him. Now, the women in the show, of course, play multiple roles. They play the spouses, they play all the different roles. But then they go into the hee-haw country style, and Jacob starts to, until the end. So, in other words, the show implies that he's starting to live his life, but the narration never did that. Okay? So Rashi's implying, maybe the reason the narration is what it is and why Judah is there, it is the familial response that someone is mourning for one of the 12 a little too excessively. As one who is the oldest of 3 children, and the youngest one is no longer with us, my parents, God bless them, the way they dealt with it is they found out he died when they were on a cruise, so every anniversary they were on a cruise. That was their way of dealing with it. And Mom went on a cruise between Thanksgiving and Christmas this year with a very dear friend, which was a wonderful, wonderful thing. She's really in a good place. It's going to be a while, yeah, but she's in a good place. But I joked with her, I said, but you can't go on your January cruise. She said, no, if it's not with your father, you can't do it. And I said, okay, fair enough, fair enough. So everyone deals with it a different way. The Judah story is perhaps there to divert from Jacob's mourning. Just a possibility. That's all Rashi is suggesting.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry?
Okay, let me ask you a question now. So, who's the child that's the product of Judah and Tamar? Is it an important person?
Anon? Oh wait, no. Oh, come on.
No, because I mean, is it important that we get this person in the narrative because they're going to be...
Oh, the person is in the
later?
narrative. I promise you. The person is in the narrative. They do have a child. Come on, go there. And Perez and Zerah. That's right.
Perez.
Yeah, Perez. And Perez is father of Boaz. Boaz marries Ruth. Ruth's grandson is David.
Right over here.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
One time I think where the source was. So she and Judah is the line to King David, the Messiah, Mashiach, the one anointed by God. When you look at the New Testament, and particularly in Mark and Matthew, when they show you the lineage from Adam and Eve to Jesus, there are lots of leaps of faith in there. But the point is because it has to come through that line, otherwise it doesn't work. Which also is fascinating, which means that the Messiah is a product of a bastard reunion. Reunion. Which would be a violation of Jewish law. So even in our tradition, and even in Christianity, aside from the Mishagos of the God impregnating Mary and all that business, right? But even that's a bastard child. And so, in our tradition, both Jewish and Christianity, the Messiah is not from a perfect union. It's that person has been chosen by God. That's all it is.
Yeah, but also the laws hadn't been given.
You are correct. And that'd be always the question, because what does Abraham serve the 3 angels that come to meet him in Sarah at the tent? Milk and meat, right? So, all right. So Rashi's fundamental insight is that the chapter placed here reflects conflicts between the brothers. The sound. The Joseph story is about Joseph, but not only about him. It's also about Judah, and to a lesser extent about Reuben. It's not only a story about individuals and the jealousy, but also about jostle for power, prestige, clout, and food. These conflicts are projected back on their eponymous ancestors. We are therefore reminded at this point later in the next portion that Judah is still a contender for Jacob's promise, although Joseph seems like his father's preferred choice. But the feelings about Judah who is the ancestor of King David, not Joseph, are mixed, sent the tale about Tamar. Without the story of Tamar, we can't justify David's existence, at least not yet. Okay? So what are the conclusions from this narration? The methodological reflection. Modern biblical scholarship has a wide variety of methods. It does not believe that one solution solves all problems. We looked at source criticism, and we looked at E versus J. We looked at subject criticism, which means why is the narration including one or the other. We also looked at what we call critical analysis. We looked at the text, we noticed there's doublets, we noticed, I want you to understand, these are all the different things that are there. Alright? It's unusually complex in contents and compositional history, has contradictions and doublets. One method cannot solve all these problems. We acknowledge that. And that's where the Orthodox come back and say, you see, you're fools, because the one true one is there, and God has not shown it the way yet. Okay? So in some cases, diachronic solutions suggesting that the text has developed over time resolve the problems, because we can say, oh, this is a little more ancient than the other. Others say synchronic solutions suggesting that doublets reflect emphasis, sometimes more satisfactory. Different readers, different solution, different combination, and so forth. So what Holtz was trying to get you to understand in the biblical narrative, and I just hope we did it in an easier way for you by giving you an example, is when you look at biblical narrative, don't just take it at face value. There's so much more there. And even though we've been doing this for years on Saturday morning, we only have X amount of time to really dive in one thing or another and quickly get on our wonderful tangents. So that's reality. Okay, any questions so far? All right, biblical law. So I chose this one mainly because it's called the Eved Ivri, or the Hebrew slave. So the question has to be asked, and I love this question. How is it we have all these rules about slavery and we just got out of slavery? Like, why are we concerned about this? Why do we have slaves? So, if we again look at the narrative, we recognize in a social economic system there are going to be poor people. And you have to remember there's not necessarily a monetary exchange at the moment. No one has coins, even though there are coins, but there are weights more than there are coins. In other words, shekels are silver, but there are a certain weight, versus gold, which is another weight, versus copper. They're weights. The bigger the weight of that metal, the value increases. That becomes money, but it's not money as we know it yet. So therefore, if you want to pay off a debt, if you don't have the precious metals or other objects, meaning you make a coat, you have a goat, whatever it is, then you give of yourself to pay off that debt. Or you give of your children who are under 13. Or a child who's over 13 can say, Dad, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to become your indentured servant. In other words, I'm going to pay off your debt by being a slave to somebody else. After 6 years, it's paid. 7th year, you go free. Many of the bankruptcy laws until about 20 years ago, when Congress started messing around because of all the lobby groups, how long was bankruptcy on your record?
7 years.
7 years. And now 10 years. It used to be 7. Because 6 years, 7th year, you're clean, and then you get start over again. That's all biblical. All biblical. But it changed it to 10. And to the idea. We had a system. So, when you look at Jewish law as already implicated, you have to look at it in a very simplistic way. There's Genesis and everything else. Because Genesis, God gives us the very first law, which is not in the text here. The very first law is be fruitful and multiply. That's the first law. Make babies. Because there's only 2 of you. I can't have any more, so you got to make the rest. Now, God doesn't say it that way, but that's what happens. But then what's the next law? Do not eat from the tree of knowledge in the middle of the garden. Okay? Christians will talk about man's grace, fall of grace from God, because they had the original sin, which was eating that fruit, which caused them to be expelled from the garden. I've joked with this about it before. What the first thing that Adam and Eve have knowledge about? They're naked. Really? That's the first thing? I can tell you, as a human development, the first thing you're aware of is the lights and sounds around you. Your nakedness is not the first thing you're aware of. Oh, but Adam and Eve were older. Like, that really matters. And why would they even know that that was nakedness? And even more so, why did they have a sense of shame? Because that's clearly what the text implies. They notice their nakedness and they cover themselves up. Again, who was telling them this? So it begs all kinds of narration questions. Which tyrannical influences are put in there? You can look at art through history and how art became either naked or non-naked over time, where the nude statue was a good thing, and then after a while, no, we got to cover it up.
We did that in the Capitol.
And of course they did. It's stupid, right? Because art's supposed to be left alone. All right, so the laws in the Torah are contained in three major collections. There's the theophany at Sinai, which is Yitro and Mishpatim. It says Exodus 21. It really starts Exodus 19 going forward. That is the portion on Yitro. We get the Ten Commandments. And the following Yitro is Mishpatim. A bunch. It's like 72 something rules. Okay? All of Leviticus, which will do everything with the sacrificial cult. And much of Numbers. And of course the central core of Deuteronomy. Because A, before you go in the land, let me go over the rules one more time. And B, what's the classic text at the end? If you follow my laws, these are the good things that will happen to you. If you don't, it was nice knowing you. Okay, I love the list. May you be inflicted with the hemorrhoids of Egypt. Because apparently Egyptian hemorrhoids was a bad thing. But that's the list. It's on the list. Okay? So, these are not three collections of different laws, but three collections of laws with a significant percentage of overlap. They seem to agree, sometimes quite different, how we understand this. So the scholars look for systemic differences between the corpora, but these collections of law in the Torah are like other ancient Near Eastern collections, neither systematic nor complete. And so we're going to look at one section just looking at the laws of slavery. The laws of slavery present an excellent case for studying biblical law. Each of these sections that they quoted already have a slave law. The law is basically secular rather than religious. The three formulations of the law share much in common: vocabulary, grammar, and so we can compare them closely. And he actually goes even further down. As an example, he's only looking at the law of the female slave in Exodus and Deuteronomy and the length of servitude. 21, 7 to 11. The female slave, literally and legally, she shall not go out the way the male slaves go out. The law of Deuteronomy begins, if your Hebrew kinsman, male or female, is sold to you, and in case the point was missed, the gender equity is repeated later in the law. You shall do the same regarding your female slave. So the female slave at Exodus and Deuteronomy seem to contradict each other. Because Deuteronomy says treat them the same. Exodus says no. When you send her out, it's a little different. So we take a look. So what they do here, they play with the word ki and im. Ki means thus or because, and im means if. Okay? So 6 years he shall work, and he shall go out to freedom with no pay. Ki, because. And then I will not go out to freedom, he shall work for him forever, because he can say, I want to stay. She shall not go out as the slaves go out. She shall go out with no pay for no payment. So it's not just a tangential point that the male slave and the female slave differ. The entire text seems to be constructed to make exactly that point. So the difference between ki and im. Ki introducing the main condition, and im or va'im introduces subconditions. So what is that all about? Now I go back to the note because I don't remember. Sorry. Oh, just give me another example in the chapter. So why did the text contrast these two types of slaves? The law is carefully constructed to contrast the law of the Hebrew slave and the female maidservant. So, the Hebrew slave is obviously a member of the community. The maidservant may be a member of the community or has been sold into servitude to that community, which is how they're referring it to here. Do not take it as absolute black and white. Because we do know there are Hebrew maidservants. We know that with a fact. Okay? This kind of organization is common in A&E law collections, meaning ancient Near East, and is referred to as polar cases based on maximal variations. And he's just quoting a textual context there. Yeah, just give you other studies based on it. Okay.
But here it says that the contrast is regarding the marriageability.
Contrast is, where are you again? Sorry?
Third paragraph.
Oh, the next line. The contrast seems to lie specifically in the marriageability of the slaves in question. Yes. Because, here's the thing. I'm the wealthy Israelite. You give me your daughter as an indentured servant. She's done her service. But I fall in love with your daughter. So I can marry her. Once I marry her, though, she has full equal status as a free woman as my spouse. Her status as a slave is no more. If I choose not to keep her, I need to return her to you as whole as I can. So here's the catch. If I slept with her, she's married. There's no and, ifs, or buts, or ambiguity there. If I do not desire her as my wife, that's fine. But I have to send her out as whole as possible, which means I send her out with a full dowry, even though I'm not married. I don't want to stay married to her. And so that's the Jewish law. Obviously, you don't do that for the male. The rules get much more complicated, though, because, all right, so he's your slave, and he falls in love with your daughter. Well, she belongs to me. So he says, you know what, I love her so much, I want to stay here because I want to be with her. That's fine, you can stay, but you're all going to work for me. And they're going to have their children. Guess what? The children belong to me too. So this gets a little weird after a while because, wait a minute, we just left where we had no freedom. And now you're allowing us to own one another, so to speak. So the premise here is that you're working for me to maintain my lifestyle, but you're free to go. But you can't take your wife and children with you. They're mine. And that's where it gets a little complicated. Okay, not a little, a lot complicated. We do not have archaeological evidence of large families being in this situation. We just don't have it. We just have these stories. We also don't have any evidence